In this video, we will be discussing one of the least talked about but most deadly retirement killers in America: inflation. We all hear about inflation. Many talk about inflation, but have you ever really taken the time to understand it? And did you know that in high times of inflation, that might be coming very soon, by the way, it can cause your investment income to be the equivalent of a 100% taxable? Meaning, for every dollar you make, you would essentially pay $1 in taxes. Now, this scenario has happened a few times over the course of the last 40 years, and many are predicting it will be happening again very soon. But before we go too far into that, let's hear what one of the smartest investors of all time has to say about inflation. This is from Warren Buffett. The arithmetic makes it plain that inflation is a far more devastating tax than anything that has been enacted by our legislature. The inflation tax has a fantastic ability to simply consume capital. It makes no difference to a widow with her savings in a 5% passbook account whether she pays 100% income tax on her interest income during a period of zero inflation or pays no income taxes during years of 5% inflation. Either way, she is taxed in a manner that leaves her no real income whatsoever. Any money she spends comes right out of capital. Yet she would find it outrageous if a 120% income tax were there, but doesn't seem to notice that 5% inflation is the economic equivalent. And if you didn't understand that, please pause this slide and read this again until you understand it, because it's very critical. And once again, this is from Warren Buffett himself. The next one here is from Ronald Reagan. Ronald said, "Inflation is as violent as a mugger, as frightening as an armed robber, and as deadly as a hitman." Although we haven't experienced high inflation for the last decade, mostly due to manipulation of interest rates and the money supply, inflation is inevitable. And don't forget that history always repeats itself. It's just a matter of time. Now let's explore what the historical inflation rates have looked like. Let's take a quick look at the historical CPI inflation index here. And take a close look at 1971. Now, do you recall what happened in August of 1971? Well, before we go into the significance of that date on the next slide, look what happened over the next 10 years after 1971. You will see two very distinct peaks of inflation, and for 1 year there, inflation went as high as 15%. So what happened? In 1971, Richard Nixon shocked the world by announcing the untethering of linking our currency to gold for the very first time. In essence, this decision enabled our country to print unlimited amounts of dollars whenever we needed to, regardless if we could back it up with gold or not. So Nixon ushered in an era of floating fiat currencies not backed by gold, but rather deriving their value from government fiat. Now, Nixon claimed he was a protector of the dollar, a warrior against inflation, and even a jobs creator. Of course, looking back now, we can see that just the opposite happened in all three of those accounts. I know you're all probably shocked that a politician would lie to us. But then in the U.S., just as today, we were all living way beyond our means. You know, back then it was the Vietnam War and growing military, which led to their large budget deficits and inflation. Now, today, of course, we're just printing off trillions of dollars to cover up the mess that we created with multiple bubbles from 2001 to 2008. And today, let me point out, compared to 1971, our debt to GDP is off the radar screen, and our current annual deficit and our total national debt make 1971 look minuscule by comparison. And remember, history always repeats itself. So to recap, our country is currently at all-time highs in debt. Our country has printed off trillions in excess cash. Our debt to GDP ratio is many times worse today than it was back when Nixon made this decision. And interest rates, if you haven't noticed, are already on the steady rise. Let's talk quickly about what inflation does when it actually hits. in particular how it affects the baby boomer demographic and current retirees, the ones who are relying on fixed incomes and steady growth. To begin, inflation really is an invisible redistributor of wealth. Reagan called it the mugger, and you guys saw some of the other comments. Some call it the silent retirement killer. But either way, it not only penalizes people on fixed incomes and other savers, it can even have the effect of making your purchasing power go negative in extreme cases. So let's talk about some solutions. Now, although just like any hedge against anything has both pros and cons, there is some good news here that does exist, and there's some powerful retirement vehicles that can ensure you continue to keep seeing your retirement income not only keep up with inflation, but much, much more. Now, what we're going to show you isn't for everyone, but if you are a baby boomer or a retiree that is sick of the roller coaster ride in the market, and you want to make sure that you're protected when inflation does hit, and you're someone who is worried about possibly running out of money in retirement, then we highly encourage you to download the free report that's going to come up next to learn more. It would be completely crazy not to at least download it. It's completely free, and we're certain you'll learn something. So download the free report today, and don't be a statistic when inflation rears its ugly head, because it isn't a matter of inflation will hit, it's a matter of when. And best of luck in retirement.